Hello, it's Andrew yet again, and today is episode 133. And so we're picking up the narrative in Matthew's Gospel, in Matthew chapter 18, verses 6 through to 10. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones, now just remember that they've asked the question, who is greatest, who is greater in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus has responded by pulling a small child among them and saying, you've got to become like one of these to get in. You've got to have the sensitivity and the vulnerability of a small child to be able to qualify. So if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it will be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. Occasions for stumbling are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling blocks come. If your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the hell of fire. Take care that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you, in heaven their angels continually see the face of my Father in heaven. Right, so the whole context of this, the way it starts, the way it finishes, is how we respond, how we deal with the weak and the vulnerable, and what the consequences can be if we get it wrong. Now, I don't know how it seems to you, but it seems to me that the language is pretty extreme. And are we actually to take him literally? Or is this a rhetorical device? Is this hyperbole, overblown examples, so that we'll get the message about how serious he is? I suspect it's the latter. Does Jesus really expect us to have millstones fastened around our necks and to be thrown into the deepest parts of the sea? Or that we cut off limbs or pluck out eyes by which we have stumbled? I don't think so. So what is he doing? Well, we've already considered some of this before. If you refer to episode 87, which was posted on the 27th of June, we looked at Matthew chapter 5 verses 29 and 30. And the title of that message was Heaven Bound and Short on Body Parts. I quite like that. Verses 8 and 9 here are a reordered repeat of Matthew 5 verses 29 and 30. Where Jesus seems to encourage plucking out our own eyes and cutting off our own offending limbs. I wanted to suggest that that Jesus is stressing the seriousness of the situation in which we can so easily find ourselves. In Matthew 5, the context was adultery and protecting ourselves from the seriousness of selling our souls to that which is unworthy of us and will ultimately cheat us of the fullness of kingdom life that Jesus wants for us all. Here, we see Jesus using the same pictures, but this time the focus is quite different. The focus is not on what's going on in us, the focus is on what we're doing to others. How our actions can detrimentally affect the lives of the fragile and vulnerable among us. And I wanted to suggest not just our actions, it can be our attitudes. It can be more than just the things we do. It's the way that we carry ourselves. They can all affect the lives of the fragile and vulnerable among us. Jesus is telling us that we're not free to simply live as we wish, without any concern for the way that our living affects those around us. There is a very real sense that we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. We see this as a very real and live issue at the moment in our world which is beset by COVID-19, where we have many people who are determined that this disease will not affect how they live. I saw a photo, an American one, with a young woman with a poster that she'd written that said, "I want my life back." It's kind of demanding that things return to as they were. And they seem totally unconcerned that their actions can affect others very detrimentally. They don't accept that they're going to affect them, and therefore don't accept that even if they get this thing, that they could pass it on to somebody else who might die. In other ways though, not just in that, but in other ways, we too are invited to care for our brothers and sisters, our neighbours, for those who are basically in our orbit. Jesus summarises the law in these simple injunctions. We're to love the Lord our God with all our hearts, with all our souls, with all our minds, with all our strength. And we're to love our neighbours as ourselves. In our reflection on Matthew 5 verses 29 and 70, that's the one back a bit, we were effectively being invited to recognise our need to love ourselves, seeking our own best long-term good, that we didn't do things that damaged our sense of who we are, our sense of what God is wanting for us, and robbing us of the best of life that Jesus desires for us. Here, we're being invited to love our neighbours, just as we would love ourselves, to be as concerned for their well-being as for our own, and to particularly view those around us who are vulnerable and fragile with a sense of concern and tenderness. So, what are the suggested punishments? Drowning by millstone, amputation of limbs and gouging out of eyes. Are these things that Jesus wants to do to us? No. They're things we metaphorically find ourselves wanting to do to ourselves once we become aware of the damage that we've done. I think that is the clue. I've said before, and I'll quote again, Julian of Norwich, sin is its own punishment. God doesn't need to do anything to us. We do it to ourselves. And if we're honest about our own lives, we'll recognise that to be the truth. It's the way it is. We do something, we've said something, we've neglected something, and we know it's wrong, and we feel wretched about it. We beat ourselves up over it. The sin becomes a punishment. God doesn't need to punish us, because we end up punishing ourselves. So when we violate someone else, and you can think of this to the most minor to the most major, we invariably violate ourselves. We create two victims. The person that we're violating and the violator is also violated in the process. There is no free lunch. There is always a price to be paid, and we pay it in ourselves. Last night I lashed out at our eldest son, who at 38 is still living with us. The first time, I did it twice. The first time I made an assumption, which I still believe to be correct, but it was less than useful. And not long later, I lashed out again over another issue. And on reflection again, I'd made an assumption, and neither of us had communicated clearly. I could have checked it out, and I didn't. And I feel wretched about it. Not only did I diminish him, I diminished myself. It reinforced the sense within me of being less, of unworthiness in me, of not being good enough, of not being enough. This morning I apologised. It would have been better if it had not been necessary. I imagine that there are some, maybe all of you, who will know what I'm talking about. Now, Julian of Norwich isn't the only one who said it. She did say it most succinctly, though. Sin is its own punishment. And she wasn't going to deny the awfulness and the horror of sin, because she talked at some length, considerable length in her book, about that. But she came to the point of recognizing that it's not in God's heart to punish us. And God doesn't need to, because we do it to ourselves. So, let's just have a little recap. We are, I want to suggest, our brothers and sisters' keepers. In the kingdom of heaven, we are all in this together. What affects one affects us all. And God doesn't need to punish us when we damage others. We bear the punishment within ourselves. And Jesus wants us, all of us, to be free and whole. I'm reminded of a friend who many years ago gave me a whole new way of seeing. I was saying something, and it involved kids actually. It was about something they were watching on television. And what I said was really dumb and unworthy. It was a criticism of the program these kids were enjoying. And he looked at me and he simply said, "You're better than that, Andrew." Wasn't that great? I thought, a very Jesus-like response. You're better than that. You're bigger than that. Come on. You don't have to do that. You're bigger than that. Yeah. But Jesus is inviting us to all be bigger. Be bigger. To not let the sort of more negative side of us be the victor. Let the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven part of us be that which claims the high ground and the ascendancy in our lives. God bless you.